Welcome back to the Azeem USA channel. We're incredibly hyped to have you hanging out with us for another deep dive today.
Oh yeah, we have a huge one lined up for you.
We really do. And, you already know the drill by now. If you love this kind of exhaustive, no stone unturned tech breakdown, you can support the channel directly.
Which we always appreciate.
Absolutely. Just drop a super chat during our live premieres or hit that super thanks button if you are catching the replay. And consider joining the channel memberships for some awesome exclusive perks. It genuinely keeps this channel running and lets us do what we do best.
Which is digging through absolute mountains of data so you don't have to. We have quite the mission for you today.
Today's target is the newly announced Nothing Phone 4a Pro. And as your resident tech reviewers, we didn't just skim the headlines for this one.
Not even close.
Yeah, we have gathered a massive, honestly kind of intimidating stack of sources for you. We're talking about the official launch video transcript featuring Nothing's design director, Penny Hoffman. We've got the exhaustive technical spec sheets, the marketing materials, and honestly my favorite part of this, the raw, unfiltered reactions from the tech community.
And that community reaction is a really crucial piece of the puzzle here, mostly because the feedback is heavily polarized.
That is putting it mildly. The mission of this deep dive is to figure out what exactly this device is. We're looking at a spec-heavy, $499 piece of hardware. Is this the true flagship killer we've been waiting for?
Or is it something else entirely?
Right, because the question is this highly controversial, polarizing redesign proof that nothing is softening its edge? Are they losing that unique, rebellious identity?
It is the defining question for this device. I mean, when a company builds its entire brand ethos on standing out, what happens when they decide to blend in just a little bit more to capture a wider audience?
Okay, let's unpack this because we have to start by addressing the massive aluminum elephant in the room.
The design.
Exactly, the design. For the Phone 4a Pro, nothing has made a radical pivot. They have shifted to a 7.9 millimeter precision-crafted full metal aluminum body.
Which is super thin.
According to the specs, it's actually the slimmest full metal phone they've ever made. And they are rolling it out in 3 colorways. You've got silver, black, and a metallic pink.
But wait, I have to ask you about this because looking at the press photos, where is the completely transparent back? Isn't that their whole thing?
What's fascinating here is the deliberate departure from that signature top-to-bottom transparent back. Since the Phone 1, that transparency has been their calling card.
Yeah, you can see everything.
Right, but in the launch materials, Penny Hoffman points out that there was this incorrect assumption floating around that every phone they make had to be transparent from top to bottom. She uses this hilarious but honestly incredibly apt analogy in the design video.
Oh, I love this part.
She says, if we did a French horn, wouldn't you see all the spit? That is just such a visceral way to put it. But it makes total sense, though. You don't necessarily want to see the microscopic dust or the thermal paste inside your daily driver.
Precisely the point she was making. Transparency isn't always the right functional choice for every single millimeter of a product. So instead of exposing everything, the design team opted for a unibody approach.
So they just boxed it up.
Not quite. They concentrated all the classic nothing elements, the NFC coil, the cameras, the glyphs into what they call a tinted window. By making it a metal unibody with this specific window, they've made the device significantly more durable. It feels heavier, cooler to the touch, and frankly, it is designed to appeal to a much broader mainstream audience who might be intimidated by a fully exposed logic board.
But building that unibody wasn't just a matter of slapping some metal on the back, though. The banter in the design studio over that metallic pink colorway was apparently intense.
Yeah, that was a huge sticking point.
Hoffman noted that when they first started testing the pink, it looked terrible. She said it looked like a cheap Photoshop color overlay. It was too uniform, too conventional.
That happened because of the new architecture with the tinted window. The color behaved completely differently than it did on their heavily transparent devices. To fix it, they had to utilize a gray deco beneath the tint.
Gray deco?
Yeah, a gray decorative layer underneath. That combination, the gray underneath the pink tint, suddenly gave it depth. It made the whole aesthetic cooler, less conventional, and much more aligned with Nothing's identity.
Even with that attention to detail, you cannot please everyone. And the community reaction in our sources totally proves it. The comments are heavily divided.
Very divided.
On one hand, you have users like just a random stan calling the all-metal black version an absolute stunner. Another user, Arcanine Trainer, praised it as a logical successor. But The backlash is very loud.
Oh, it's deafening in some forums.
We saw comments comparing it to a Xiaomi or an Apple copycat. There was one user, L10, who literally wrote, "Are we serious, guys? I'm disappointed. Explain this, Carl. Explain it now."
The frustration really centers around the physical layout. Users like Clockwork Owl pointed out the blank, solid color space sitting right under the camera plateau.
Yeah, that big open space.
Exactly. For the purists, that large expanse of uninterrupted metal feels more like a budget product from CMF, nothing sub-brand, than a true premium nothing phone. They feel the design language has been overly concentrated, leaving the rest of the device looking like exactly what it. Nothing promised they would never build, a boring slab.
It is a massive risk to alienate your core fan base like that. But let's pivot to the specs, because if the design has people divided, the raw performance under the hood might just bring them back together.
The internals are seriously impressive.
The spec sheet is throwing around the Qualcomm Snapdragon 7 Gen 4 processor built on the 4nm TSMC process. For a $499 phone, how does that actually translate to real-world performance?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this spec sheet reveals a lot about Nothing's internal philosophy. Penny Hoffman explicitly stated that they refuse to downspec their devices.
Which a lot of brands do, right?
All the time. Many companies will intentionally throttle or limit a mid-tier or A-series phone just to protect the sales of their flagship model. Nothing didn't do that here. They want this phone to actively compete with the flagship phone 3.
Wow.
And to your question about the 4nm TSMC process, think of nanometers as the distance between the microscopic switches inside the brain of the phone. The smaller that distance in this case, 4 nanometers, the faster the electricity travels and the less power it wastes as heat. It makes the phone incredibly fast and highly battery efficient.
Okay, that makes sense. But the spec sheet also lists up to 12 gigabytes of LPDDR5X RAM. And then there's this wild footnote saying you can extend that up to 20 gigabytes by utilizing the ultra-fast UFS 3.1 storage space. How does storage space suddenly become RAM?
For those wondering how that works, it basically borrows unused storage space on your phone and temporarily treats it like short-term memory, or RAM.
So it's like virtual memory on a PC.
Exactly. Imagine your desk is your RAM, and your filing cabinet is your storage. If your desk gets too cluttered with open apps and games, the phone temporarily uses the top drawer of your filing cabinet to keep things easily accessible. It allows you to keep a dozen heavy apps open without the phone stuttering or forcing you to reload everything from scratch.
With all that power, I'd imagine this thing gets incredibly hot, especially wrapped in a metal unibody.
It would, but to keep all that metal from turning into a frying pan, they integrated a massive 5,300 square millimeter vapor chamber.
A vapor chamber.
Think of it like a high-tech radiator for your phone. It contains a tiny amount of liquid that absorbs heat from the processor, turns into vapor, spreads that heat across a much larger surface area to cool down, and then condenses back into liquid.
That sounds like serious gaming hardware.
It is. Because of that cooling system, they are specifically calling out in the marketing that this device handles heavy gaming loads effortlessly. It pushes BGMI at a full 120 Hz and PUBG at 90 Hz without dropping frames.
Let's talk about those frames, because as a tech reviewer, I am looking at the display specs, and they are impressive. They packed a 6.83-inch flexible AMOLED screen onto this thing, protected by Corning Gorilla Glass 7i.
Top-tier protection.
Yeah. It has a 144 Hz adaptive refresh rate. But the number that jumped off the page at me is the 5,000 nits peak brightness. What does 5,000 nits actually look like in practice?
It is a staggering number for HDR content. To put that in perspective, a standard laptop screen might sit around 400 or 500 nits.
Right.
When a phone hits 5,000 nits peak brightness, it means you could be standing on a beach in the middle of July with the sun glaring directly down on your screen, and you will still be able to read a text message or watch a video as clearly as if you were sitting in your living room.
That is wild. And they paired that brightness with a 2,500 Hz touch sampling rate.
Which is crucial for the gamers you mentioned earlier. When we talk about a 2,500 Hz touch sampling rate, we're talking about the screen scanning for your finger 2,500 times every single second.
So zero delay.
Effectively zero lag between your finger touching the glass and the screen reacting. If you were playing a fast-paced competitive shooter, that millisecond difference is the line between winning a match and throwing your phone across the room.
But pushing a 6.83-inch screen to 5,000 nits and scanning for touch inputs thousands of times a second, that has to murder the battery life, right?
You would think so. However, they have managed to fit a 5080 milliamp hour battery inside that slim 7.9 millimeter frame. According to the internal testing data, that promises around 17 hours of mixed use, factoring in music, video gaming, and messaging.
That's practically a full day of heavy use.
Yeah, and when you do finally drain it, it's supported by 50-watt fast charging. You can plug it in and hit a 60% charge in just 30 minutes.
Here's where it gets really interesting. You've got the polarizing design, you've got the raw power and the battery, but how does the Phone 4a Pro handle the one thing everybody cares about most? The cameras.
Always the biggest deciding factor.
The hardware breaks down like this. You have a 50-megapixel main Sony sensor with optical image stabilization. You have a 120-degree ultra-wide lens, and around front, a 32-megapixel wide-angle selfie cam. But the marketing isn't leading with the wide angle. They are shouting about a staggering 140x ultra zoom capability. Wait, 140x zoom on a $499 phone sounds like a complete marketing gimmick. Is this just digital noise, or is there actual hardware backing this up?
We do have to play the voice of reason here and look closely at the technical specifications because there is a catch. The hardware includes a 50-megapixel periscope camera, which features a 3.5x optical zoom. That optical zoom is fantastic. It uses physical lenses moving back and forth to give you a crisp, clear image without losing any quality.
So where does the 140x come from?
That 140x figure heavily relies on what they call a 7x in sensor zoom, combined with extensive digital zoom algorithms. At 140x, you are relying entirely on computational photography.
Ah, I see.
The phone's brain is essentially looking at a very pixelated image and using AI to guess what those pixels should actually look like to fill in the blanks.
So we shouldn't expect to be shooting magazine covers of the moon from our backyards.
Not quite. However, we shouldn't dismiss the camera system just because of an exaggerated marketing number. The real magic is happening in the software. The Phone 4a Pro is utilizing the TrueLens Engine 4 and Ultra XDR.
What does that do exactly?
This essentially applies Dolby Vision-like HDR effects to your images. It takes multiple photos at different exposures instantly and blends them together, bringing out vivid highlights in the bright spots and lifelike colors in the shadows. Plus, it supports 4K Ultra XDR video recording at 30 frames per second. The actual, everyday image and video quality is going to be significantly elevated, even if you never touch that 140x slider.
Speaking of elevated features, we have to talk about the upgraded Glyph interface. When I saw the solid metal back, I thought they killed the lights. But the glyphs are back, albeit confined to that new tinted window design.
The design choices around the new Glyph Matrix are really deliberate. It now features 137 mini LEDs. While that is technically fewer individual lights than some previous models, the way they've designed it covers a 57% larger area, and it is 100% brighter, hitting around 3,000 nits just on the back of the phone.
That's incredibly bright for backlighting.
Yeah, and Penny Hoffman mentioned they used larger, blockier pixels for the Matrix this time around. This wasn't just an aesthetic choice, it was highly functional.
Because it allowed them to bring those flagship features from the Phone 3 down to this model. You get the caller ID function where you can assign different light patterns to different contacts. You get flip to glyph to silence the phone, the visual timer that ticks down using the light strips, and the solar path tracking.
Building that interface inside the new tinted window presented a massive engineering headache, though. There's a brilliant behind-the-scenes detail in the transcript about the red recording light.
Oh, the little indicator light.
Yeah. Hoffman explained that getting that specific red light right was incredibly difficult. When you put LEDs behind a diffuser material, the material that makes the light look like a smooth bar instead of individual bulbs, you naturally get hot spots. Areas where the light is intensely bright while the edges are dim.
And if you don't use the right materials, the light just bleeds everywhere and looks cheap.
Exactly the problem they faced. They had to endlessly test the transparency, the milky tint of the red square, and the opacity of the surrounding parts to prevent light bleed. If they hadn't done their due diligence, the light from the red indicator would have completely washed out the rest of the camera window. It's a testament to how obsessive their engineering team is.
Obsessive hardware needs obsessive software, which is a perfect transition to Nothing OS 4.1. This is powered by Android 16, and they are promising 3 years of Android updates and 6 years of security patches, which is very solid for this price point.
Definitely.
But the big focus in the marketing is their new essential AI tools. You mentioned earlier that the Snapdragon 7 Gen 4 brings a 65% increase in AI capabilities. What does that actually do for me on a random Tuesday?
This is where Nothing is trying to treat AI less like a novelty chatbot that you open when you're bored and more like a deeply integrated operating system manager.
Okay, give me an example.
Let's walk through a scenario. Say you are walking to your car and you have a complex idea for an email. They've integrated a new voice-to-text AI that doesn't just dictate your words, it naturally transcribes and edits your spoken voice into a formatted email or article instantly, stripping out the ums and ahs.
That sounds incredibly useful.
Yeah.
The sources also mentioned the essential key. What does that do?
It's a physical integration for instant capture. With a single tap of the essential key, you can instantly capture a photo, start recording your screen, or capture a voice note without having to unlock the phone and dig through menus.
But where do all those captures go? Because usually my voice memos just sit in a folder that I never open again.
That is where Essential Space comes in. All of those captures, notes, and photos are funneled into an AI-powered library that automatically organizes your ideas. And for the first time, Essential Space is cloud-synced.
Oh, that's huge.
Right. That means you can capture a thought on your phone while walking, and when you sit down at your laptop, desktop, or even check your smartwatch, that thought is already organized and waiting for you. It's meant to reduce the friction between having an idea and actually working on it.
All of this hardware, camera tech, and AI integration brings us to perhaps the most critical segment for anyone looking to upgrade: pricing, sustainability, and the all-important fine print.
We always have to look at the fine print.
Let me just drop the pricing structure right now because it is highly, highly competitive. For the base 8 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of storage, you are looking at $499 in the US or £499 in the UK. If you want to max it out with 12 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage, it caps at $599 or £549. Global pre-orders officially began March 13th, 2026.
At those prices, the value proposition is huge, but we do need to read the fine print. Let's talk about the IP65 rating. The marketing materials highlight impressive resilience and submersion protection. The technical specs clarify that it has been tested for water immersion up to 25 centimeters for up to 20 minutes.
So I can take it swimming.
I would strongly advise against that.
Good to know.
Yeah, the fine print strictly warns you that this IP65 rating is only applicable in controlled laboratory environments using fresh water. They explicitly state, do not take this device to the beach and do not take it into the pool. Liquid damage outside of those strict conditions is not covered by the warranty.
Wow.
So essentially, it's safe if you accidentally knock over your coffee on your desk or get caught in a heavy rainstorm. But if you drop it in the shallow end of the pool on vacation, you are buying a new phone.
Great catch. That is a very important distinction. We also have to highlight the sustainability wins here because looking at the spec sheet, they are genuinely impressive. The phone uses a 100% recycled aluminum back, 100% recycled tin in its circuit boards, and 80% recycled steel for the internal components.
They've really committed to the materials.
And the packaging is 100% plastic-free. But the stat they are pushing hardest is a carbon footprint of just 50.5 kilograms of CO2e.
Which is nothing's lowest ever carbon footprint for a smartphone. To put that 50.5 kilograms into perspective, manufacturing an average modern smartphone usually generates around 70 to 80 kilograms of CO2.
So they cut a massive chunk out of that.
Exactly. Nothing has essentially shaved off a third of the typical emissions, which is a massive leap for a relatively small company, especially while shifting to a full metal unibody design.
So what does this all mean? When we look at this massive stack of sources, the incredibly detailed spec sheets, the shift in design philosophy, and the resulting community backlash, we're looking at a device that represents a massive leap in raw performance.
It really does.
For $499, you are getting the Snapdragon 7 Gen 4, a 5,000 nit display, a 50-80 milliamp hour battery, and deeply integrated Essential AI. It's an absolute powerhouse that punches way above its weight class. But to get there, to pack all that tech in and make it durable enough to appeal to a wider mainstream audience, nothing had to introduce a cleaner, more conventional metal aesthetic. And that aesthetic undoubtedly ruffled the feathers of their earliest, most loyal purists who wanted a transparent window into everything.
This raises an important question for you to ponder long after this deep dive ends. When a brand is built entirely on standing out, on explicitly rebelling against boring tech, what happens when they decide to soften their quirky design to capture the mass market?
It's a tough balance.
Do they successfully bridge the gap to become a household name? Or do they risk eventually becoming the very identical glass and metal slabs they originally set out to destroy? It is the ultimate tightrope walk between maintaining a niche identity and achieving global scale.
It really is. And we cannot wait to see how the market actually responds when these hit the shelves in late March. That is going to do it for our breakdown of the Nothing Phone 4a Pro. Thank you so much for hanging out with us on the Azeem USA channel for this deep dive.
It's been a fun one.
Sure. As a quick reminder, if you found this breakdown valuable and want to help us keep bringing you these exhaustive reviews, please use that super chat feature, drop a super thanks below the video, and strongly consider joining the channel memberships to support all our future deep dives. We appreciate you, and we will catch you in the next one.